We've got enough parts here now, and more are gonna be showing up in the next day or two, so we can start tearing down the wife's TJ for its transformation. So let's get it popping. For our bumpers on this project, we ended up going with Moto-Built, which my good buddy Austin, TJ Moira, used a ton of their stuff, and he seemed to be pretty happy with it. So we went with them. They were having a Black Friday special, basically like $100 off per bumper. For the rear, we went with the Rock Crawler bumper without a receiver. And then on the front bumper, we went with the Crusher series, which I just thought looked super cool. Now, you're not gonna get any hardware for the front one. You're gonna have to reuse your stock stuff that you took off. The rear bumper actually has some hardware, but you do have to reuse the bolts that go up from the bottom into the frame. The instructions were not on their site after scanning, which is annoying to me. These little triangular brackets, which you can see I've painted. I love using this stuff. I use it on frames and all kinds of projects. Those will go here. You'll see how this bolt goes in the bottom of the frame there and holds this bracket, and then where it fits in relation to the bottom of the bumper itself. You can see I've just basically sprayed the back side or the inside of these parts. Then I'll turn them over and prep them. These do come fully assembled. Unlike, I guess, if you get a bull bar or a Stinger, they might not have those welded on. One thing I do like is bare metal parts, so I can, again, use this stuff on them, because it's a lot easier to touch up than like that wrinkle finish, which I can't stand, or powder coating. Realistically, you get that stuff chipped, you know, by a shopping cart in the mall, and it just is impossible to touch up and match. I'll do a little prep work on this stuff too, because I intend to do some paint work in here, all this stuff. I don't know if that was white overspray or exactly what was going on. So we're gonna sand a lot of that stuff down and clean it up some. Notice also we're gonna have to order some new of these bump stops. These things are just done. Basically, I've got to get rid of these links and then take off the rest of the upper and lower control arms. I wanna hang on to them before we assemble this lift kit. Now, I always reach out to Wheel 411 when it comes time for wheels, tires, and suspension, whether it's lifting or lowering. Again, this is sort of a budget build. This is a rough country 2.5-inch lift. It comes with the springs. We upgraded to those M1 shocks. They're like, I think $130 or $140 upgrade on this kit. And you can see these control arms are way stronger and heavier. So this is all the rear stuff. You can see how massive that is. And then that's the front stuff, the front shocks, front springs. That's the front track bar, which is an upgraded heavy duty. There's nothing that I saw in here for the rear track bar. I think that's just the front track bar and the mount for it. This is the links that you get for your anti-sway bar. I kind of just sort of assembled this a little bit so you can see what's going on. You'll be able to pull this pin and then slide this off of the axle mounted area. And then they send you a bracket where you can swing it up and attach it to the frame to keep it out of the way. So, I mean, it's not push button like a Rubicon, but let's be honest, that push button on the Rubicon probably takes longer for it to engage than just jumping out and doing this. I will put the part numbers for the bumpers and all the lift kit components in the description. You'll see the components also listed from previous videos that we've done, like the stereo system. The pro tip when you're painting anything, especially with aerosol, do not try to cover it on the first, I don't know, or second coat. Just do a light dusting. I know it doesn't look like much. It looks like you're trying to do a camo paint job, but sneak up on it. Otherwise, if you don't let it kind of tack off between those light coats, you ever notice when you spray paint something, it feels sticky forever? It's because you pounded that paint. You know, it never fails when you're trying to do something fun on your car. And then I just thought, you know what, let me check these drums because they look a little ratchet with rust. And as soon as I slid it off of there, this spring fell in my hand. And you'll notice how gooped up it is in there. And it looks like Brake fluid's leaking, which it'll be from this wheel cylinder. That's just super common. And that's why most part stores have them sitting on the shelf. All right, well, that's all done. I tell you, I think I've had dental visits more fun than doing these. You know, to keep these things kind of looking shiny like they are, I'm just gonna use this clear coat. Put a couple of coats on them and, you know, kind of match the rotors once we're done. I mean, yeah. Probably don't leave me alone with 3 or 4 cans of black spray paint unless you want this to be the result. Well, factory suspension out of the way. Oh, by the way, you do need to reuse this hardware, so I cleaned it up a little bit and sprayed some black paint on those too. We may have to touch it up later once it's installed, but we'll deal with that when we need to deal with that. I ordered these bump stops on Amazon. They were pretty cheap, like 20 bucks for the set. And they did come with the cups and the bolts, although it was a ton of trouble to unbolt the old cups from the frame. I don't think it's that necessary. If you just take a screwdriver, you can pry these things out pretty easy. And then we'll probably just stick these up in these cups that I just went ahead and rattle can spray painted anyway. Gonna accomplish the same thing. All right, so step 1 of this install, which by the way, if you'll go to Rough Country's website, you can download a PDF of these instructions. And so your pictures are way more clear than what you'll see on some of these things, which is not so wonderful. I do some grinding to make this new track bar mount sit flush on this. So I guess there's some casting marks that need to be gone, like that L specifically, because we're not losers. Also, check the description for a link. I've actually got some merch available. We got that drilled out. Let's do a little test fit here. Yeah, that's gonna be good. I'll tell you the pro tip, make sure you have yourself a decent set cobalt bits. Now the instructions call for us to go ahead and install this bracket, but not to put the track arm on yet. It wants to remove the lower and upper control arms, which we did. By the way, we marked them with the soapstone before we took them off, so we'd know which ones we were dealing with. So they want you to put together their kit. This offset goes towards the bottom like so. Thread these in. The lower control arm needs to be 3/8 longer than the factory one, and the upper control arm needs to be a 1/4 inch longer. You're gonna swing it down like that. You wanna extend it a little bit, and hopefully it'll keep everything happy. And we don't drive this thing like miles and miles and miles down the highway, so it's not super crucial as far as alignment, but it is crucial for pinion alignment because you'll get driveline vibration and it's kind of annoying. All right, so I've got both lower and upper control arms just in place and threaded finger tight. And then I've got the front axle on the jack. Kind of let it down about as far as the brake lines will allow us. We're gonna see if we're gonna need a spring compressor or not. Make sure that your isolators are still up here and there's nothing on the bottom for them to rest in. See if we can just muscle it up and over this lower pedestal. Oh, I can let a little more out. Actually, you can put ratchet straps around these too and pull them tight if you don't want to kill yourself. If you're smarter than me. Ooh, good way to get your fingers smashed. There is a little indent so you'll know where to place the spring. And then this side actually still had this little clip and the screw. I think the passenger side one got lost during someone's maintenance. Looking at this drive shaft angle, because that's a double cardan drive shaft from the factory on the front, which basically means it's got a U-joint in the front and the rear, slip joint in the middle. You don't want any pinion angle at all. It needs to be completely parallel straight to the transfer case. So yeah, the instructions do differ than what the online instructions say. And I'm told that if you read a little deeper, there's some reference about if you run a longer drive shaft, then you can extend these a little bit longer than they are. Which, seeing this now, I mean, these are set to what they suggest, upper and lower with the factory drive shaft. And you can see how close it is here. When the suspension unloads, it's only gonna get closer to this. Although, yeah, so I don't know, the shock probably won't let this side down much lower, but as you can see, the weight of the vehicle is currently on these springs and they still have that arc to them. So I don't love it, but I guess this is the maximum amount of lift you can run without replacing your drive shafts and doing a slip yoke eliminator and the CV rear drive shaft. So it's another, I don't know, $1,500 if you want it to be perfect and if you want to go any taller than 2.5 inch. All right, here's some updates and some clarifications for you. I went ahead and installed the shocks. They're pretty straightforward to bolt those back in place using their factory hardware on the bottom and then the supplied hardware up on the top. Let's see, what else? I tightened the rest of this stuff up, upper and lower control arms, and I have the axle on jack stands now because I installed the track bar. Here's a giveaway of where the track bar goes. See that flat spot in there so it clears that nut? Yeah. Also, they tell you 31 3/4 inches to set this for a starting point. It just says end to end. What they mean is center to center on these eyelets that are in here, or you can grab the, like let's say the back edge of that one to the back edge of this one to get a same thing as center to center. So there's some clarification for you. Now we're moving on to the anti-sway bar. I bolted the top piece in. And here's something that could get confusing. It tells you adjust the sway bar. Well, you're not adjusting the sway bar, you're adjusting the links. 10 1/4 inches from top to bottom. Now, if you get a tape measure, like technically, is it from the bottom, like to here? And then is this 10 1/4 inches to here? I guess so. We're gonna try that and we'll see what happens. You'll notice this is not the nut that they sent because this did not thread on at all. This is a Nilight nut they sent with it. Their hardware was just completely incorrect. Luckily, I just had some that will fit it laying around. So when you get ready to do a little wheeling, pull the pin, push that off of there, and then you rotate your sway bar up enough to where it'll fall into this bracket. And use that same pin to clip them in here. Now, one thing I'll point out, I reused this hardware that holds that little plastic thing on because they sent you non-metric screws to go in there in their place, and they won't thread in there unless you, into the frame rails, unless you send a tap in there or something up front. So just reuse your standard hardware, I guess, even though it's ugly. We're made our way to the rear now, and I did misspeak earlier. This is a track bar relocation bracket that comes in the kit. So you're gonna move it with their supplied hardware from a location like here, which is stock, up to this area, which happens to be 2.5 inches taller on a 2.5 inch lift. So who would have guessed? Control arms kind of follow the same theory on the rear as they did on the front. So if you're using, well, let's see, the lower control arms, this one needs to be 3/8 longer than the stock one. On the upper control arms, they're saying to make this one 1/4 inch longer than the stock one if you're using a stock drive shaft. Remember, there's a pinion angle that is a concern, like 1 to 2 degrees less from parallel to the ground if you have a standard drive shaft. If you have this double cardan, then you don't want any degree angle. You want the pinion and the drive shaft to be straight. I didn't disconnect the sway bar like the instructions said, which probably would have been smart. Anyway, track bar is in with this new bracket and the bolts. You have to drill here and here and get those in. Not that terrible of a job. Brake line still has some slack here, so I'm not concerned about it. And this thing is just so close. I feel like I can just help it on. I cannot hear now. There we go. I'll do the other side and then we'll raise it up and start putting control arms under it. All right, the rear suspension is all buttoned up now. I've got these installed and torqued down. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. I use this anti-seize on kind of everything that needs to stay serviceable. So definitely put it on the threads, on the upper and lower control arms. By the way, these are snugged up as well. Also like the shock bolts up there. I put it on those because if you do have to service stuff, especially if you're in something that goes off-road, gets wet, I put it on this axle. I'll put some more on there too. I just sort of test fit and everything. On the driver's side, this parking cable, I ended up just cutting the tab off that bolted here because it was just in like the terriblest bind. And now with these pads laying there, they're not gonna make contact with anything. There's a little tip, these TJs, terrible for this exhaust tip that like hangs off right here. I don't know how many times we were out wheeling and we'd drive off of a rock or something and you'd hear this little bell get rung. I do have a concern about this ride height because for those of you who watched the first video, there was a rule we were supposed to abide by. Now I'm 6'1"-ish, depending on which gas station I'm leaving, and this is where it sits now. All right, on to our bumpers. They have been curing since we painted them last weekend. So they are good to go as far as handling them. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the front bumper is gonna reuse all the stock hardware, which I guess you could get your own hardware if you wanted to that matched it. I'm gonna put some, probably some anti-seize on these two because it looks like they're prone to rusting. This is the hardware that comes with the rear bumper. I'm not really even sure there's enough holes in the bumper to use this many bolts, but we're gonna get it installed regardless. All right, I'm gonna use the buddy system with this stool so I can hold one end at least halfway up. I think I want to send the bolts out from the inside out. That way all I have to do is hold a wrench to the inside of this bumper. Man, I need smaller hands. I feel like the move is to put the top bolt in first, but I'm having a hard time getting that started. Now I know these guys have top quality products, but it's not touching face here and it's not touching on the other side, but it's making contact in the middle. So either the factory rear panel is bowed out or in the middle, or this one is bowed forward in the middle. Still, it'll suck up nice and tight once we get all these bolts in. So the bumper's on. These are definitely the toughest ones to hold that bolt head in there. I will make this complaint. The hardware is so short that if you put any washers at all, the bolts won't even get into the nylon on these nuts, which the whole point of them being lock nuts is that the thread into that nylon so they don't back out. And I don't like not using washers, so I don't understand about that. Be better, Motobuilt. For the front bumper, I've been back and forth about should we bolt the winch and the fair lead on there first. Which, by the way, this is a Bulldog 9,500 pound winch. It has the identical specs of a Warren winch. I like the motor size. I like the remote also because literally you just choose to either have it wired or unplug it from the cable and hit the wireless button and that'll light up. Anyway, apparently it's way better connectivity via wireless than the Warren is. And I have experience with a Warren winch and I did not like it as far as like the controller losing signal like as I'm pulling. And sometimes that can be kind of dangerous. So we saved a few $100s from a Warren and we're choosing this Bulldog. I guarantee it's made in the same factory. You know, they're all from China. I know it's gonna be kind of snug because it was a pretty tight fit even before I had paint on the frame, which I'm okay with that because it won't want to move around. So this side is kind of there. Ugh, I'm gonna mess up my beautiful paint. Now to decide if we need to do the fair lead first, this guy, or the winch bolt down, depending on how much space we have. Get in here and put those nuts. A little snug here. We'll probably work with that. Looks like we're gonna have to drill these holes out a little bit for the hardware for this fair lead. It's pretty bulky. It doesn't make a lot of sense. All it does is guide a synthetic rope. Whatever. You know, this wasn't as bad as I thought. Motobuilt left little gaps in the bumper so you can start those bolts and even get a ratchet in there with a socket. And then on the bottom side, it's just pretty straightforward. You can access them. This is one thing on this Bulldog winch. I'm not so sure about this clevis situation. I guess put that in here. And this goes like so. It's got this weird bushing thing. Leave me a comment if this is something common that everybody knows about but me, but seems really weird. Almost like a one-time use little keeper bushing in the middle. Doing this right. Yeah, it went in there. Okay. So that's how that works. We're gonna be one of those guys that hook their winch in like that, right? Yeah, we're winch people. I was able to easily feed these power cables under the hood here and then tie them to the battery post and just sort of left the extra slack here. We're gonna be changing this battery anyway because it is freaking more than 7 years old. So not a great idea. It is the Duralast Gold, which I think is the house brand for O'Reilly. So, I mean, it's a quality battery. It's just way past its prime. Make that stuff a little neater. Also, we've got a powered sub coming, so I'll have to run power to it. Anyway, it's just power and ground is all that feeds this thing. I plugged the remote in, and it lit up wired. It's lit, so you can switch it to wireless when it's not plugged in. Clearly marked for out and in. Yeah, we want to get that kind of snug so it doesn't rattle. That's good and tight. Oops, can't do this with one hand. There we go. Out, in. Cool. So it works. Hopefully we won't need it. It's one of those things you drive around with $700 or $800 or $1,200 worth of parts on the front bumper, hoping you never need them. All right, let's talk about alignment. By the way, I put the wheels on here. So again, Wheel 411, look him up for whatever you're putting wheels on. Race cars, Jeeps, lifted trucks, lowered cars, and stuff like these Nazi cars. These are a set of fuel, I don't remember what, they're 17 by 9. And we have those 1.25" adapter spacers to go 5-on-5 lug. Because a TJ, as you probably know or don't know, 5-on-4.5. And that's kind of a difficult wheel to find. In a cool style. It was easier for me to put the wheels on and do this alignment than it is to have the big fat tires, which you'll see soon enough. So first of all, you need to do your track bar adjustment. That's the first thing, which is that this crossbar here. And it decides where your front axle is under your Jeep. Center the steering wheel up best you can. I'm gonna put this on here and then I'll set the level. I've already done it, by the way. I just almost forgot to video it. So if we get this set up just like so, that tells me it's level from the fender and we're exactly that far out. And I can take it, and I'm even gonna turn this around to make sure everything tracks properly. I'm gonna put it against this fender and I'm gonna set it on this wheel. And you can see it is also perfect. So we've got the track bar done. The next you start dealing with your toe, which first thing you want to do is go in here, get your steering wheel straight, because no one wants to be driving with a crooked steering wheel. The way these Jeeps are made, the drag links, etc., you want to set your toe on the passenger side first by turning this. And it needs to have a little bit of toe in. And see, without a tire on here, it's easy to see that back wheel when it kind of disappears. So this needs a little more toe. Then recheck your steering wheel. Then you'll set the toe on the driver's side by adjusting this bar, because it basically just connects to the passenger side. So this is the last step. Oh, these little clips, I guess, used to live on something. I don't know what their benefit was, but I'll probably just cut those things off. They're not helping anybody. Anyway, that's the steps to at least get your wheels pointed the right direction. So maybe a 1/16 or an 1/8 inch more in on the front than the back of the wheel. The camber adjustment, which is on the bottom of this lower control arm, you really want to mark that before you take the suspension apart. Put it back where it's supposed to be. I mean, again, we've went over this ad nauseum. You want that lined up with the drive shaft straight, but this does add a little bit of camber, but leave that for the professionals. So what we just went over will make your Jeep be good to go to drive it around, maybe a day or two if you need to get it, get into an appointment to have an alignment done professionally. Or you know what, if you're just off-roading it or just city driving and you've got some big knobby mud tires, honestly, this will be completely fine as far as alignments go. These are the tires that we got from Will 411. By the way, excuse my voice, I got a sinus infection for my birthday. The brand is Atlander, Roverclaw MT. I don't know if that's a 1, I think it is, but they are definitely an off-road mud tire. Got good side lugs, but still a reasonable pattern for doing like street-friendly things. The cool part is they're definitely heavy rated. They're load range E and they are 10 ply. So that gives you like 3 polyester, 2 steel, and 2 nylon along the tread, and then a 3 polyester ply sidewall. So the good news with something like this, especially since this thing only weighs about 3,000 pounds, if you drive around with it on like 10 pounds, you don't have to worry about the sidewall flexing so much that it comes off the wheel. It also is pretty rugged this way, so definitely go this route. We chose the 305 7017, which if you look at some charts, it'll say is a 34-inch tire, which, by the way, they're a pretty good little rim guard here. We're gonna see that better once we get them mounted up. The tire just sitting flat on the concrete, it does compress a little bit, so we should get a pretty good measurement here. I've got 33 and an 8. I almost get anxiety having tires and wheels mounted and balanced, because usually the guys that work in the back couldn't care less about nicking them or scuffing them or lining the dots up correctly. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you have a yellow dot, you line it up where the valve stem is. A red dot, you choose that over the yellow dot. Anyway, little stuff like that bugs me. Just doesn't take any extra effort to do it right. Fingers crossed. Well, I'm proud to say that Discount Tire did a good job. I looked them over. They were very careful not to scratch them or anything, and they lined the valve stems up with the red dots as I requested, and also asked for a little short valve stem. So there they are. Let's get them home and get them on. Oh man, just look at this image of the before shot of this Jeep, and now look at how it sits right now. There's a giant difference visually. And I understand videos and pictures don't really do it justice typically of kind of its presence. Again, it's over 6 foot tall on the roof line. It gained all kind of clearance underneath with this setup. So I'm pretty excited about it. One thing I think we probably should do is like test the flex on the front and rear, see if they're gonna get into the fenders very quickly. Disconnect these sway bar links and then put a floor jack under it on the extreme side. Yeah, what a good, pretty good stance. Tire width is just about right, not too wide where it's just gonna be detrimental to this thing's kind of little 4-liter straight 6. Doesn't have a ton of energy to move big tires, but I am super impressed with it. Bumpers turned out for sure. The wheel and tire combo I think is kind of perfect. pretty impressed with this little 2.5-inch lift kit and the amount of articulation it gives us. Get that back on 1 power. That is pretty close. So I do think if we had it stuffed enough to get this tire off the ground, we would certainly be into that fender. So we're gonna have to be mindful of that, because I don't think the wife's gonna be none too happy if we tear these perfectly good OE Sahara fenders off. All right, first test drive, checking our alignment out. You know, I didn't even notice that much of a gear difference going from those 31s to these 33s. We're doing 45 mile an hour, just under 2,000 in fourth. Steering wheel is straight down the road, no hands. So pretty happy about that. One thing you can always test on your alignment is when you hit the brakes. I'll let go of the wheel and just hit the brakes. Yeah, nothing. Whoops, clutch. Forgot I'm in a manual. Yeah, never try to turn the wheel one bit. Really can't tell a change in any kind of street manners. These little short wheelbase cars like this, they're all kind of darty, but they're tough to have them to ride well also. But this had stock suspension with just the Rancho shocks, and now I think it, I don't think it lost any ride quality. Uh-oh, we got a manual transmission guy in front of us now. He's learning. Feel you, brother. Last piece of the puzzle before we take this thing wheeling is the steering gearbox skid plate. A lot of companies make them. I ordered this on Amazon. There were several options available. We went to Terraflex, this part number, because if you look at a TJ, maybe this is just me, but the first thing that's going to make impact is that steering gearbox if it's below the bumper. So I don't think that's probably the best thing to hit a rock if you're within this range. So we're going to install this thing. It looks pretty simple. This is what comes in the box. A set of instructions with a picture of one that doesn't look like yours. Decals and one sort of self-tapping screw. So essentially, pretty straightforward. We'll see. Let me nick my paint real quick. You take that bolt out, and this bolt's, run it through there. Take that bolt out, run it through there. And on this last one, you're going to mark and drill that round tube on the frame cross member to install the bolt they sent you. Looks like we're gonna have to slot this hole towards the rear of the vehicle just a little bit. They slotted this one, but it doesn't really do any good because you've got this pin that indexes right there in that hole. So there's really no way to move anything any further back, which would help. So, you know, with that lined up and putting a bolt in there, I'll just have to open this one up just a little. Handled. So we put our TJ in crawl mode, aka took those fender flares off so we don't tear those up. And now we're gonna go do Twin Mountains Off-Road Park near Quinton, Oklahoma, and see how much flexi this little 2.5-inch lift kit wants to do. some of that two-door life.
We'll have these fenders tore off. A quick assessment. It appears these tires get into that sway bar on both sides and it bent a little mount for that link. Both sides kind of suffered the same thing. Overall, pretty happy with it. I think it does a pretty good job, but really no competition to my homeboys, TJ. These are not the same. So after making it back home and assessing everything, we did get into our fender a little. We're gonna have to work that metal. Probably just get, they sell extended bump stops that you can put in here so it'll make contact before the tire makes contact into the fenders. It seems like that's probably our easiest fix. I may even bolt like a cup here, fabricate something out of some steel pipe and just raise that up. You don't necessarily need a bunch of up travel. Street driving and stuff, you want some for comfort, but if I can keep these front tires out of these fenders, I think it would be a much more enjoyable trip. Thanks for watching the video that's this long, but we wanted to do the whole thing, comprehensive build with some payoff at the end with off-roading, just to kind of see how well that suspension worked. And I hope we did that for you. So thanks for watching. Check the merch below. Here we go.